On Route 301, there is a point where a family remains whole and at the same time destroyed. 4 people are still inside a car that is no longer there, and the father remains outside, trying to get in every night at the same minute, repeating the same gesture that never reaches completion. The SUV was found on the shoulder with no signs of arrival, no footprints around it, no disturbance in the untouched sand. Doors locked from the inside, headlights on, backpacks on the seat, an open water bottle, a child's drawing on the floor, and enough space for 4 people sitting, but empty. Outside, nothing. No footprints, no drag marks, no sign that anyone had stepped there. At 2:17 a.m., passing truck radios pick up a breathless male voice asking for help and saying only, "I'm on the outside." Thermal sensors record 4 seated shapes suspended in the air and a 5th standing beside them, leaning against something invisible, as if pressing his shoulder against a door that isn't there. The father's name begins to be heard. It never finishes. Before we continue, hit like now and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications, because the stories told here aren't the kind that leave your mind once they're over. And tell me in the comments what city you're watching from, because what was recorded on Route 301 didn't stay confined to the desert where it happened. Route 301 cuts across an isolated stretch between northern Chile and southern Peru where there are no nearby towns, no continuous lighting, and no steady traffic. It's a strip of asphalt laid over compacted sand and stone, exposed to constant wind and extreme temperature swings. Nothing interrupts the line of sight for miles. Anyone driving there at night keeps their speed up and their windows closed, because stopping makes no sense in a place that offers no shelter, no services, and no human presence. It was into this empty corridor that the Ortega family drove after sunset on August 14. Father, mother, 2 children, a routine trip. Their route was confirmed by toll booths, traffic cameras, and messages sent throughout the day. The SUV continued normally until the last point with cell service. Then it entered the dead zone and was never recorded in motion again. Hours later, the vehicle appeared on the shoulder as if it had always been there. No tire marks in the sand. No footprints around it. No trace of anyone getting out. And since then, at the same minute each night, instruments continue to record 4 people seated where the car no longer exists, and a man outside, leaning into empty space, repeating a gesture he can never complete. The patrol arrived at mile marker 301 at 3:42 a.m., guided by an emergency call that had disconnected 3 times before transmitting stable coordinates. The originating number belonged to Daniel Ortega. Dispatch confirmed the phone had lost signal 2 hours earlier, with no reconnection logged. Even so, the recorded audio captured his voice, identifying the vehicle model, the number of occupants, and their exact position on the shoulder. The final sentence was clear: "I'm on the outside." Then came short breaths, audible physical strain, and a dull lateral impact repeated 3 times. The gray SUV was exactly where the voice had indicated, perfectly aligned with the shoulder, parallel to the road, as if carefully parked. There was no disturbance in the sand, no approach tracks, no tire impressions leading to that point. The adjacent asphalt was untouched, no skid marks, no debris, no fragments. The vehicle was present without a path of arrival. Its headlights remained on, projecting 2 fixed beams into the open desert. The light ended abruptly in empty darkness, reflecting off nothing. The first officer approached from the driver's side, sweeping a flashlight through the interior. The doors were locked from the inside, windows fully closed. In the back seat, 2 children's backpacks lay open, notebooks partially exposed, a pencil case spilled. On the floor rested a drawing, 4 stick figures holding hands. The 4th figure's head outline stopped short of completion. Beside it, a vertical line had been pressed so hard it slightly tore the paper. The officer later described the impression that the drawing had been interrupted mid-motion. The driver's door was forced open. The alarm did not sound. The dashboard flickered on briefly, displaying 2:17 before going dark. The driver's seat was positioned for use. The seatbelt remained latched. In the front passenger seat, a folded jacket was pinned beneath the belt, as if someone had prepared to step out and never finished the movement. The vehicle's radio attempted to power on and froze in a continuous hollow static, like wind passing through a metal cavity. Around the SUV, the fine sand preserved fragile ripples. No human footprints, no animal tracks, no drag marks. A 20-yard perimeter showed uninterrupted surface continuity. The absence did not appear wind-erased. Small natural irregularities were too intact to have been recently disturbed. The car occupied a space where nothing had touched the ground before or after it. At 4:11 a.m., while the forensic technician documented the interior, the patrol radio received a new transmission on the open channel. A male voice emerged with irregular distortion, compressed and breathless. The door. A short pause. Won't open. Background audio carried strained breathing and the same dull lateral thud in rhythmic sequence. Signal triangulation placed the source less than 6 feet from the SUV's right side, precisely where the sand remained untouched. An officer directed his flashlight to that location. Nothing visible. Yet the beam revealed a subtle darkening in the sand's texture, as if a shadow existed without an object casting it. The effect lasted seconds before fading. No depression formed. No displacement occurred. At 4:26 a.m., Daniel's phone was recovered beneath the driver's seat. Battery at 31%. No signal. The call log showed the last outgoing call at 1:58 a.m. to an unsaved number, duration 11 seconds. Dispatch records matched that timestamp. An unsent draft message read, "I'm outside, can't open." The text ended abruptly. A faint linear mark crossed the screen, as if pressure had been applied against a rigid surface without shattering the glass. The trunk was opened. 2 intact suitcases, folded clothing, children's toys, a first aid kit. Nothing missing, no signs of rummaging. The compartment appeared unusually clean, dustless. The vehicle did not show abandonment, only occupancy that had ceased without exit. At 5 norther at 3 a.m., with the perimeter extended to 50 yards, the radio transmitted again. The same voice. Push. Pause. From inside. 3 lateral impacts followed, evenly spaced. The signal origin remained fixed on the right side of the vehicle, outside it. No officer stood there at that moment. The sound did not match metal or glass impact. It resembled contact against a hollow material that did not exist. An officer approached again. The flashlight crossed the unstable shadow point. For a fraction of a second, the beam outlined a vertical distortion at torso height like heat shimmer inverted. No surface, no structure, just density in the air. The officer stepped back. The distortion vanished. The sand remained unmarked. At 5:17 a.m., the voice returned. "The kids." A short breath. "They're inside." The impact pattern repeated 3 times. A metal stake was pressed into the marked spot in the ground. At 12 inches deep, the rod met resistance, as if contacting a rigid surface. Additional force deflected it sideways without penetration. When withdrawn, the sand closed seamlessly. The tip of the rod registered nearly 2 degrees colder than ambient temperature. Inside the SUV, the rear seatbelts were now visibly taut, locked in a position consistent with occupied seats. No bodies were present. Weight sensors read 0. Yet the fabric showed diagonal strain as if held against torsos. The seats displayed minimal depressions inconsistent with total absence of mass. When an officer manually released one belt, the tension ceased only to relock itself seconds later. At 5:44 a.m., the first light of dawn revealed the desert in full clarity. Nothing but the SUV. No people, no tracks. The right side point remained undisturbed. The radio recording still held the final phrase, "I'm on the outside." As the patrol prepared to withdraw and await reinforcement, the SUV's headlights flared brighter for a brief moment. Despite the engine having been cold for hours, the interior radio emitted the same hollow static. On the open channel, one final transmission came through. "Won't open." A pause. A short breath. 3 impacts. Silence. No mark appeared in the sand. Mile marker 301 was sealed off at 10 p.m. that same night. 2 patrol units remained on site with continuous floodlighting and a fixed thermal camera aimed at the SUV's right side, the exact point from which the transmissions had originated. The sand beneath the lights showed no disturbance, no impressions formed. No wind erased anything, because nothing was there to erase. The vehicle was left in place for direct observation. The rear seatbelts remained tensioned. The slight depressions in the seats were still measurable. Weight sensors continued to register 0. The interior configuration did not change. At 2:14 a.m., 3 minutes before the recurring timestamp documented in the recordings, the thermal camera registered a gradual drop in temperature inside the vehicle. There was no physical heat source to justify it. The air within the cabin darkened on the monitor, shaping itself into 4 seated masses arranged exactly where occupants would be. No bodies were visible to the naked eye. Only the thermal spectrum showed presence. At 2:17 a.m., the internal thermal rectangle stabilized. 4 seated forms. The driver leaned slightly left, consistent with seatbelt tension. The front passenger remained upright. 2 smaller shapes occupied the rear seats. Their proportions matched the recorded ages of the Ortega children. On the right side, outside the vehicle's physical structure, a 5th vertical mass appeared. It stood approximately 1 foot from the passenger door. Then it inclined forward. The posture was unmistakable. Torso angled, shoulder pressed against something invisible, as if bracing against resistance. The contact point showed a colder thermal signature, suggesting pressure against a defined boundary. The patrol radio crackled immediately. Breathing, labored, open. A pause. From inside. 3 dull impacts followed, identical in acoustic profile to those recorded the previous night. Audio triangulation confirmed the origin at the right side of the SUV, external to the cabin. An officer advanced holding a calibrated metal probe. At 2 minutes, it slowly toward the invisible plane between the external mass and the vehicle's thermal outline. The probe stopped abruptly. There was no visible obstruction, no material surface. But the rod would not pass. Sensors attached to its shaft recorded a resistance force consistent with impact against rigid steel. Simultaneously, the audio channel captured the hollow thud in perfect synchronization with the pressure spike on the instrument. The probe tip temperature dropped 2.1 degrees Fahrenheit within 2 seconds of contact. The external mass leaned harder. The internal 4 did not move. At 2:17:09, all thermal signatures vanished simultaneously. The interior air returned to ambient temperature. The following night, the team repeated the configuration with additional instrumentation. Pressure sensors suspended in the air grid, directional microphones positioned precisely at the right side perimeter. At 2:17 a.m., the pattern repeated. 4 inside, 1 outside. This time, the external mass appeared slightly closer to the internal boundary. Measurements confirmed a reduction in separation by approximately 1 inch compared to the previous night. The posture was deeper. The shoulder pressed further into the invisible limit. The voice emerged strained. Duh. The syllable cut off by impact. 3 strikes, identical rhythm. The internal masses remained seated. However, the front passenger figure exhibited a measurable lateral displacement of approximately 1/4 inch during the peak of external pressure. The movement ceased as soon as the event ended. Seatbelt tension sensors inside the vehicle confirmed a brief increase in strain consistent with external force applied against a closed door. The door itself did not move. On the 3rd monitored night, a thin steel plate was mounted vertically in the zone of expected contact prior to 2:17 a.m. The plate stood suspended without touching the ground. When the event began, the external mass intersected partially through the steel plate without displacing it. The thermal distortion darkened where the figure overlapped the metal, yet the hollow impact sound originated from a plane slightly behind it, the same invisible boundary aligned with the SUV's absent door. The steel plate remained unaffected. The limit was not physical in the conventional sense. Daniel? The name formed more clearly before being interrupted. The breathing was more intense than on prior nights. Pressure sensors showed a 14% increase in applied force relative to the first recorded event. Still, the barrier held. On the 4th night of direct observation, the team introduced aerosolized photoluminescent particles into the external airspace moments before 2:17 a.m. When the mass appeared, the particles adhered to nothing, yet they outlined it. For 9 seconds, The shape of a man leaning forward was faintly visible in midair. Head tilted. Right shoulder elevated. Forearm extended. Palm braced. The outline flickered but remained coherent. The interior four stayed motionless. At peak compression, the invisible boundary displayed slight curvature on the particle grid, bending inward toward the cabin by less than half an inch. The sound was no longer three distinct knocks. It was continuous pressure. At 2:17:9, the particles dispersed. The curvature disappeared. No residue remained. The sand below remained undisturbed. By the eighth recorded night, total progression measured nearly 4 inches from the original separation. The external mass leaned immediately upon manifestation, as if conserving no effort. Daniel. The name carried urgency. Pressure sensors recorded the highest values to date. For a fraction of a second, the internal front passenger figure shifted almost half an inch. The barrier concavity deepened measurably, but it did not break. At 2:17, the shapes disappeared. The SUV remained parked. Headlights steady. Interior empty to the eye. Weight sensors at 0. 4 inside. 1 outside. And the outside was getting closer. The external mass had advanced nearly 3 inches closer to the internal plane since the first observation. Each night added millimeters. The internal masses remained seated. The front passenger shifted slightly again under peak pressure. The driver's thermal outline leaned marginally further left than on the 9th night of continuous observation. The team installed a 3-dimensional matrix of air pressure and thermal sensors along the SUV's right side, forming a volumetric grid exactly where the external mass had been manifesting. The goal was no longer simple confirmation. It was measurement. At 2:16 February 8 seconds before the established time, the temperature inside the vehicle began to drop again without any physical cause. The cabin air darkened on thermal display, shaping into 4 seated figures with slightly sharper definition than on previous nights. Driver angled left. Front passenger upright. 2 smaller forms in the rear. No movement. At 2:17 a.m., the external mass appeared. It was closer than the night before. Measurements confirmed an additional advance of just under half an inch. The torso leaned forward immediately, shoulder aligned precisely with where the passenger side door should have been. Air density sensors recorded a sudden spike at the invisible plane between the external and internal volumes. The boundary was there. Not visible, but measurable. Ah! The syllable began before impact. 3 sharp compressions followed, though now they were less like knocks and more like sustained force peaks. Each pulse registered simultaneously across the grid, confirming that the contact plane extended vertically, exactly matching the dimensions of the absent door. A thin carbon fiber probe was introduced slowly toward the boundary during peak compression. It stopped midair. The resistance curve was absolute, not gradual. Like striking reinforced steel. Micro-vibration sensors embedded in the probe captured oscillation patterns identical to the acoustic frequency of the impact sound. The probe tip temperature dropped nearly 3 degrees Fahrenheit. The barrier behaved like material, without being material. The external mass leaned deeper. The internal 4 did not react. Event duration, 9 seconds. Then disappearance. On the 10th night, cumulative progression since the first recorded event surpassed 3 inches. The external figure now manifested with no transitional fade-in. It appeared already braced, conserving no movement. Donnie. The name extended further before interruption. The pressure curve rose 12% higher than the previous maximum. For the first time, the internal driver mass shifted measurably during peak force, approximately 1/3 of an inch toward the left. Seatbelt strain sensors registered simultaneous tension increase. The boundary bowed inward visibly on thermal imaging, not breaking, but deforming. When the event ceased, the cabin returned to static stillness. By the 11th night, the team deployed suspended microparticles again, this time combined with laser plane mapping to capture distortion geometry. At 2:17 a.m., the external shape materialized within the particle cloud. For 9 seconds, it was unmistakably human in posture. Head lowered, shoulder lifted, forearm flat, palm braced. Laser mapping revealed a shallow concavity forming in the invisible plane, approximately 1 inch deep at center under peak compression. The internal figures compressed microscopically toward the driver's side. The barrier rebounded when the event ended. Progression total, approximately 4 inches from initial separation. On the 12th night, something changed. At maximum pressure, the internal front passenger mass moved independently before the event concluded. A lateral displacement of nearly half an inch sustained for a full second. It was no longer merely reactive compression. It was internal response. The voice that night reached full clarity. "Daniel, I'm outside. No distortion." The words completed before the pressure surge intensified. The sound of fabric friction became audible through directional microphones, cloth against a hollow surface. Yet no physical surface existed. Pressure values peaked at 18% above baseline from week 1. The barrier held. On the 13th night, the external mass advanced further, nearly 5 inches from the original measurement. The concavity deepened visibly under laser plane mapping. The torso pressed harder, as if the full weight of a body were leaning forward. For the first time, 2 internal figures shifted simultaneously under maximum compression. Driver and front passenger moved almost 3/4 of an inch leftward. The rear figures remained static. The internal rectangle did not collapse. It displaced as a unit. The boundary remained intact. Daniel. The name came fully, clear, recognizable, followed not by 3 knocks, but by continuous force sustained for the entire 9-second duration. The probe introduced during the event showed deflection curvature along its shaft, confirming that the invisible plane was not merely resisting contact. It was bending. On the 14th night, progression reached nearly 6 inches. The external mass manifested so close to the internal volume that only a narrow measurable gap remained. Laser plane data showed a concavity approaching structural threshold levels consistent with tempered automotive glass under stress. Yet there was no glass. The internal 4 were visibly compressed leftward. Seatbelt tension reached maximum recorded strain. Still, weight sensors read 0. The paradox persisted. On the 15th night, the barrier deformed further than ever before. 7 inches of cumulative progression. The external shoulder and partial upper arm appeared to sink into the concavity during peak pressure, though no breach occurred. The voice strained. "Daniel, open." The phrase extended beyond prior attempts. The internal passenger mass shifted nearly a full inch. For 0.6 seconds, the laser plane grid flickered as though the boundary might fragment. It did not. Event duration remained 9 seconds. On the 16th night, compression exceeded all prior values. Cumulative advancement approached 8 inches. The concavity now resembled a bowed membrane under extreme load. The external torso was nearly flush with the invisible plane. The internal figures were pressed to the driver's side limit of the thermal rectangle. The driver mass leaned farther left than ever before. The boundary did not rupture. It flexed. It endured. "Daniel, I'm..." The sentence cut off as pressure reached peak amplitude. 9 seconds. Release. Absence. Data review confirmed a consistent pattern. Incremental nightly advancement of the external mass. Increasing deformation of the invisible boundary. Measurable internal displacement under peak compression. Constant duration of 9 seconds. No physical residue. The separation remained, but it was no longer static. It was being worn down, millimeter by millimeter. By the 17th night, cumulative advancement surpassed 9 inches. The concavity was now deep enough that the external torso appeared embedded within the boundary's curvature during peak force. Internal displacement reached over an inch collectively. Pressure sensors approached calibration limits. And for the first time, the barrier produced an audible strain, a low-frequency resonance beneath the hollow contact sound. It sounded like tension, but it did not tear. When the event ended, everything reset to baseline geometry, except the progression value. It remained. The outside was moving inward. The inside was shifting away. The limit still stood, but it was bending. On the 18th night of controlled observation, cumulative advancement of the external mass measured just over 9 inches from the original separation point. The invisible boundary aligned with the absent passenger side door remained intact, but its deformation profile had changed. The concavity recorded by laser plane mapping no longer appeared shallow and elastic. It appeared strained. At 2:16:58 a.m., internal temperature dropped rapidly. The 4 seated thermal masses manifested simultaneously, already compressed toward the driver's side from previous night's displacement patterns. At 2:17 a.m., the external mass appeared fully engaged. There was no gradual lean anymore. It materialized, already pressing. Shoulder embedded deep into the curved distortion. Torso angled forward. Forearm extended flat. Palm braced. Air density sensors spiked immediately to peak values seen only at the end of prior events. The barrier flexed on contact. "Daniel, I'm outside." The phrase was complete and stable. No distortion. The sound of continuous pressure replaced the earlier pattern of separate impacts. It was no longer knocking. It was sustained force. Laser plane mapping showed the concavity deepening beyond 9 inches at its center. The external shoulder region overlapped visually with the internal boundary by nearly an inch, though no true breach occurred. Inside the thermal rectangle, the driver and front passenger masses shifted sharply leftward, over 1 inch in less than half a second. Seatbelt strain sensors reached maximum tolerances. Still, weight sensors read 0. The paradox held. For the first time, a secondary deformation appeared along the upper edge of the invisible plane, a ripple traveling vertically as though stress were redistributing along a flexible membrane. The barrier was no longer uniformly resisting. It was compensating. The event sustained peak compression for the full 9 seconds. At 2:17 a.m., the forms vanished. But when baseline geometry returned, the progression measurement did not. Total advancement now registered 10.2 inches. The boundary had not reset fully. On the 19th night, the team reinforced measurement calibration, anticipating structural threshold behavior. At onset, the 4 internal masses appeared slightly misaligned compared to prior nights, compressed even before external manifestation. At 2:17 a.m., the external mass emerged so close to the internal volume that only a narrow measurable separation remained. It leaned harder than ever recorded. The concavity formed instantly. Pressure sensors exceeded prior maximum by 7%. A low-frequency resonance pulsed beneath the contact sound, sustained and deeper than previous strain signatures. "Daniel, open." The voice carried urgency. The concavity deepened to nearly 11 inches. For 0.4 seconds, the laser plane grid fractured into interference lines, not breaking, but distorting under stress. Inside, all 4 masses shifted collectively leftward nearly 1.5 inches. The rear figures, previously static, now displaced for the first time. Coupling was complete. The outside was affecting all inside. Yet the barrier did not tear. It flexed and held. Event duration, 9 seconds. Reset. Progression total, 11.1 inches. On the 20th night, deformation began earlier. At 2:16 and 9 a.m., 1 second before manifestation, the internal rectangle flickered. At 2:17, the external mass appeared already partially embedded into the concavity zone, no gap visible on thermal display. It was as if the boundary had grown thinner. The shoulder region penetrated visually deeper than any previous measurement. Air density gradient peaked beyond calibration tolerance, requiring post-event data reconstruction. The concavity exceeded 12 inches at center. The internal masses were forced nearly to the driver's door boundary of the absent cabin volume. "Daniel, I'm on the outside," the phrase repeated in full. The contact sound was now continuous vibration. The resonance beneath it intensified, not cracking, but straining like tensioned composite under load. At 2:17:06 a.m., something unprecedented occurred. The internal front passenger mass moved independently against the compression, not merely displaced, but shifting forward by nearly half an inch, as though reacting to pressure from the other side. A response. For 0.3 seconds, the laser plane mapping showed partial transparency along the center of the concavity, a thinning. Not an opening, but less density. The external mass surged. Pressure peaked beyond recorded limits. The boundary held. At 2:17:09 a.m., the event ceased. Geometry returned. Progression remained at 12.4 inches. On the 21st night, the concavity formed instantly and deeper still. The external torso appeared almost halfway into the curvature of the plane. Internal displacement reached maximum observed values. The four seated masses were compressed tightly against the left boundary. The barrier emitted a sustained low-frequency oscillation throughout the 9 seconds, audible even without amplification. "Daniel," the name alone this time, followed by prolonged force without separate phrasing. At peak compression, the laser grid showed microfracture-like patterns across the surface geometry, stress lines radiating outward from the center point of contact. They faded immediately when the event ended. No rupture. Progression total, 13 inches. The team concluded that the barrier was undergoing cumulative structural fatigue, not resetting, wearing down. On the 22nd night, the manifestation sequence accelerated. Internal masses appeared already compressed. The external mass emerged mid-lean. There was no measurable separation before contact. The concavity exceeded 13 inches. Air pressure values stabilized at sustained maximum for nearly the entire 9-second duration. At 2:17:04 a.m., the upper right quadrant of the boundary flickered visibly in the laser mapping, a discontinuity lasting less than 1/10 of a second. During that instant, the internal driver mass shifted rightward, toward the external presence, by approximately 1/4 inch. Not pushed, pulled. The distortion vanished immediately. The barrier resealed. The driver mass returned to its displaced left position. The external mass continued pressing. The event ended without rupture. Progression total, 13.6 inches. On the 23rd night, the concavity deepened to nearly 14 inches. The boundary's curvature now resembled a stretched membrane nearing tensile failure. The external shoulder and upper torso were almost entirely engulfed within the distortion zone. Internal displacement plateaued. There was little room left within the absent cabin volume. The voice returned clearly. "Daniel, I'm outside." At 2:58 a civil. The low-frequency resonance spiked sharply, a tonal shift indicating material stress concentration. The laser grid flared white at the center. For 0.2 seconds, the concavity flattened abruptly, not outward, but inward, as though something from inside pressed back. The external mass halted its forward progression momentarily, then forced again. The barrier held. The event ended. Progression total, 14.2 inches. The door had not opened, but it was no longer rigid. It was bending under sustained effort. It was thinning, and for the first time, the inside had pushed back. On the 24th night, cumulative deformation of the invisible boundary measured 14.2 inches at peak concavity. Structural fatigue modeling suggested that if progression continued at the established rate, threshold behavior would occur within days. At 2:69 a.m., the internal thermal rectangle manifested already compressed to its lateral limit. The four seated masses appeared tightly aligned against the absent driver's side door boundary. At 2:17 a.m., the external mass appeared fully engaged. No emergence phase. No gap. Immediate compression. shoulder deep inside the concavity, torso angled forward at maximum extension, forearm flat, palm braced, air density sensors saturated instantly. The barrier flexed beyond previous geometry. "Daniel, I'm on the outside." The voice was steady, sustained. The low-frequency resonance beneath the contact sound intensified, no longer intermittent strain, but continuous structural vibration. Laser plane mapping recorded concavity exceeding 15 inches. Internal masses displaced microscopically further left, though space was nearly exhausted. At 2:17:05 a.m., a new phenomenon occurred. A secondary thermal fluctuation appeared 25 miles north along Route 301. No vehicle present. No internal rectangle. Only a vertical mass, leaning forward in identical posture, pressing against empty air. Duration, 9 seconds. Simultaneous with the primary event, the team monitoring remote sensors confirmed synchronization to the millisecond. At mile marker 301, the original configuration persisted. 4 inside, 1 outside. North of it, only the outside. On the 25th night, 2 additional remote points registered manifestation at 2:17 a.m. One south of the primary site, one along a disconnected access road. Each displayed the same vertical thermal form. Same lean, same braced shoulder. No internal counterpart. Audio from the southern sensor captured faint breathing. Then, "I'm outside." The phrase cut abruptly at 9 seconds. At mile marker 301, the boundary concavity deepened to 15.6 inches. The internal masses shifted slightly under peak compression. The barrier did not rupture. On the 26th night, 5 remote manifestations occurred simultaneously across separate segments of the highway. All identical in posture, all lasting 9 seconds. None associated with a vehicle. The primary site remained unchanged in structure, 4 inside, 1 outside pressing against the deformed boundary. But progression at the main barrier plateaued at 16 inches. It did not increase further. The external mass continued to apply maximum force. Yet the concavity no longer deepened. Structural fatigue appeared to have reached equilibrium. On the 27th night, the phenomenon expanded beyond the highway corridor. A sensor in a freight yard outside Antofagasta recorded a vertical thermal mass at 2:17 a.m., leaning against open space between shipping containers. No vehicle. No internal rectangle. Audio captured clearly. "Daniel." Simultaneously, at mile marker 301, the father pressed against the invisible door as always. The phrase completed there. "I'm on the outside." The remote manifestation ended at 9 seconds. The primary event ended at 9 seconds. Synchronization remained exact. On the 28th night, 9 separate remote points registered manifestations across a 40-mile radius. Everyone showed the same physical configuration. Every one lasted 9 seconds. At the primary site, barrier deformation held steady at 16 inches. No additional progression. But internal displacement patterns changed. During peak compression, the internal driver mass shifted rightward slightly toward the external presence for nearly half a second before snapping back left when the event ended. A bidirectional force. The boundary remained intact. On the 29th night, urban sensors in 3 cities along the Ortega family's confirmed travel route recorded isolated external manifestations at 2:01 surface events. Ladiao. Ekazu, CD Klatlanazerates. CD Karalangadet. How are that? As a lack certain sorry. You are not at the time to Lilos, is 17 a.m. Parking lots. Empty intersections. Industrial yards. Each location displayed the same leaning posture. Each lasted 9 seconds. In 2 of the cities, directional microphones captured the full sentence. "Daniel, I'm on the outside." The voice print analysis matched prior recordings from mile marker 301. Meanwhile, at the original site, 4 remained seated inside the absent SUV. One remained pressing at the boundary. And now, others appeared elsewhere. On the 30th night, remote manifestations numbered 12. Highway shoulders. Rest stops. A closed gas station lot. An agricultural service road. All synchronized. All identical. None with internal counterparts. The outside was no longer confined to a single location. At mile marker 301, the barrier showed subtle fluctuation during peak compression, not deeper concavity, but lateral ripple along its vertical axis. The internal masses reacted again, slight rightward pull at maximum strain. The driver mass moved almost half an inch toward the boundary before returning. The barrier did not open. On the 31st night, 16 remote manifestations were recorded across the region. Some occurred near areas where passing vehicles' dash cameras later reported fleeting distortions at roadside. 9 seconds. Always 9 seconds. At mile marker 301, the father pressed as always. Shoulder embedded in the concavity. Torso angled. Palm braced. Daniel, I'm on the outside. The sentence now emerged clearly at every remote location as well. The same tone. The same pacing. The same breath pattern. Multiple outsides. One inside. The structural measurements at the primary barrier indicated no further inward progression beyond 16 inches. The membrane had stretched to its limit. It flexed. It resonated. But it did not tear. On the 32nd night, the monitoring grid registered 21 simultaneous remote manifestations. The phenomenon had become spatially distributed. No longer a singular external presence attempting entry at one fixed point. The outside was replicating. At mile marker 301, the internal rectangle remained stable, 4 seated forms compressed within the absent cabin. The external mass at that location remained singular. But beyond it, copies, or projections, appeared, each performing the same action against nothing. Each leaning. Each pressing. Each speaking the same line. At 2:17 a.m., during peak compression at the primary barrier, a synchronized audio surge occurred across all remote sites. Every recording captured the sentence in unison. Daniel, I'm on the outside. For a fraction of a second, the primary boundary at mile marker 301 flickered on laser plane mapping, thinning across a central vertical seam. The internal driver mass shifted rightward more than ever before, nearly an inch. The external shoulder surged forward. The concavity trembled, but the barrier did not rupture. At 2:09 a.m., all manifestations ceased simultaneously. Remote sites returned to empty air. At mile marker 301, the SUV remained parked. Headlights steady. Interior visibly empty. Weight sensors at 0. 4 inside. 1 outside. And now many outsides elsewhere. The progression inward had stopped, but the phenomenon had expanded outward. The father continued pressing at the invisible door where his family remained seated. Across highways, parking lots, empty industrial yards, and silent streets, the same leaning figure continued to appear each night at 2:17 a.m. Always for 9 seconds. Always pressing. Always repeating. I'm on the outside. The family remains inside. The father remains outside. And now, the outside is no longer only one. If you've made it this far, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. And tell me in the comments what city you're watching from, because at 2:17 a.m., somewhere near you, something may still be trying to get in.